Okay, there's a red icon in the top left. I think that means we're live.
Yeah,
Eric, News Coulomb, how are you?
I'm doing well, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thank you. It's getting low light here though, so we're starting to have to figure out the evenings again.
Yeah, we're
Um,
just getting started, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you've got the opposite problem of the daylight giving you too much heat, right? Um, so yeah, hey everybody. It's the third one of these now, and I was saying to Eric, this is once is a test, twice is just a treat, and I think the
Yeah,
third is a series. So
yeah,
we may well be on course for a regular topical thing here. But this one is on the eve of something that is kind of exciting for people, I think,
right.
albeit kind of in the weeds and dorky, but that's what we're here for. So Electrify America changing prices tomorrow. It is kind of a surprise because we don't know exactly what each site will bring. So,
Yeah,
we're going to go through the context a little bit, and I'm going to try and jump into the comments to say hello to everybody. So, yeah, if you want to kind of take it away, Eric, and just do a little banter, I'll make sure we're
yeah. And I think Sky was already here waiting for us. So hello,
yeah,
hello, and
no
yeah,
positive vibes only.
yeah. So and Jay Donaldson, howdy, howdy. So yeah, the thing that's interesting about this to me is this is coming on the heels, right, of EA already increasing their prices, right? Because it used to be what 31 cents per minute for members, and now and this is just general broad sweeping, or 31 cents per kilowatt hour, and then the 36, and that's in the per kilowatt hour billing site. So they had already upped the prices a bit, but this August 17th, they're going to up the membership from $4 a month to $7 a month. And then they brought with it a whole lot of other changes. And while it's easy, I think, to get negative about this price increase, there are some positives to it too, because I know I've at least on my end been hearing a lot of people uh, with issues about EA not charging the idle fees, right? So the idle fees were in place. They said you go over, your charge stops. 10 minutes later, those idle fees start kicking in, and we've seen pictures all over social media of people plugged in for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they're well into their idle, and there's no billing going on. There's nothing. There's no punishment whatsoever. Um, and then I don't know if you want me to go on with some of the other changes, but the other big one is they were already doing uh, price per state, right, as their region control. They were doing price per state that varied, and sometimes they're charging by per kilowatt hour, sometimes they're charging per minute. But now they're going to go even more granular and go per site. And I think that's what you were saying, Steve, is we just don't know the details of that just yet, like exactly how that's going to work out. So
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, context to idle fears, it's really a resurrection because they were in place. I've had them apply to me in the Bolt, and we'll get that in back
oh,
to that in a little bit. But this must be 2 years ago now,
right.
and they kind of zeroed them out. You could always see them. It would tell you had that countdown, the idle fee kind of grace period of 10 minutes, which is
Mm-hmm.
still staying in place, I believe. But it would be zeroed out. So you weren't going to pay anything, even if you did stay over. And this ID4 in back of me is one of our local sites, which it was at 94% when I took the picture, but it did go beyond that, I promise. So
Yeah.
this is not an irregular thing. What the reason most people are I think positive about this is that there needs to be that penalty, and we'll get onto this. It kind of went away, and I kind of have my suspicions of why it went away for the last 18 months, I would guess, roughly. But before that, it was there 40 cents a minute after 10 minutes grace period. That's exactly what it's going to be as it comes back by the sound of it. Doesn't sound
Mm-hmm.
like that will be variable by site. That'll just be the clear penalty for overstaying your welcome once you're fully charged.
Right.
Yeah, so that's where we are. Let me see.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, well, I think you're going to peruse the comments a
Yeah.
bit. But I was going to say thanks for that history, because I personally have never gone into the idle zone. Like I've never overstayed. And my original thought was they were charging it, and it sounds like they were, but then they were crediting your account. So that now aligns. That makes sense to me why people were saying that they'd never actually charged idle fee, is if they were pulling it after they build it. So
yeah. So I mean, it has, and Sky kind of points out here, any worries about the weird EA app hanging issues and whether that will lead to inaccurate idle fees. My supposition as to why they got rid of them, I think most of mine happened in Pennsylvania, but it's when I've been in the Bolt obviously takes a little longer to charge. I typically plan a shopping trip around it, if we're going to some of those places where we'll need camping gear, that kind of thing. And I've been in Walmart at the checkout, which sometimes is a big long line, and got notification my charge session stopped. I'm at 50, 60%, whatever it is at the time, and idle fees will begin accruing. And, it's that decision to either I haven't stopped the charge, I'm fairly certain no one else has stopped my charge. It's just one of those kind of old EA issues that I haven't actually seen during the period where the idle fees have been down, and maybe one or two have dropped, but over hundreds and hundreds of charging sessions with EA, and it when it does drop, that's they don't necessarily know. They just see it's binary. It's either the charging session is in progress or it's not. So it's either somebody could potentially stop you. There's a certain malfeasance out there, especially with the growing kind of sentiment of polarizing, EV feeling. And I forecast some issues here, even though it is something I think we need to have in place with sessions dropping inadvertently, people not wanting to have the session having ended, but idle fees accruing. Now, I'm fairly confident, having known, what dealt with EA's billing team before, that it will be, reimbursed fairly quickly. But there's also potential then to game that system in reverse, right? If people think about this and try and say, I didn't stop the session, the only time it's really going to be clear is if they've hit 100%. EA knows that, and there's no arguing with it. You were fully charged, you had the stop, and then this is the outcome of what happens if that you just leave it on. So I have that caveat because I have been, I've seen them before. I think I don't recall. I'm pretty sure I got them refunded without too much effort, but it's a thing to consider as we go into this kind of brave new world of idle fees being back.
Yeah, and actually, I want to give a shout out to EVgo on that too, because I actually had an incident probably 4 or 5 years ago now where I plugged into one of the EVgo chargers and the interface died, but the charging continued until morale improved. So I just left it plugged in because I said, oh, well, it's still charging. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to do what I need to do and leave. And then I unplugged and left. But what I didn't realize is that station had lost contact with EVgo's head office. And so I got billed $139 as though I had been charging there for 26 hours. And then, but it was 5 minutes on the phone, reimbursed my account, no problems. That's why I didn't even really mention it on my channel at all, as it was such a non-issue. Yep. So to your point, Steve, I think they're going to have to be able to know, right, what's the difference between a charger going down and sending a false signal, because I've seen that happen with some of the EA chargers, where it's still continuing as though someone were hooked up and they're clearly not there anymore. Right. And then, but then, like you said, if they hit 100%, EA is going to get that notice. But then the other flip of the coin, and this would take someone really, I guess, nefarious in their intentions, but someone could just unplug and still stay parked there. And that's another issue that we've seen. So idle fees are very good for if someone is plugged in with an active session hooked up and accounting for that. But if someone just walks up, unplugs at 100% after 5 minutes and then goes back and does whatever they're doing, it doesn't free up the station. But as far as EA is concerned, they're no longer getting billed and they're no longer blocking the charger. So it's not a perfect solution. And there are, to your point, I think they're going to probably watch for people who are habitual about it. And so maybe 1, 2, 3 strikes you're out. If you the first time you've ever gone into idle fees and it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, they might refund you. But if you've done it 2 or 3 times already, I could see them saying, all right, no more refunds. You've cried wolf too many times. So
It's an interesting point. It's also adjacent to kind of people gaming the free charging system. That I don't want to go too much off on a tangent, but at the moment it's fairly easy to, in the Ioniq 5 with the 30-minute sessions, to be able to just unplug at 30 minutes and then plug back in and it starts again. It's supposed to be an hour period in between where you shouldn't be allowed to use that plan again, but it's that it's easy enough to do, and people are pretty open about doing it. Should be pretty clear in the app then, or in their system what's going on, because you've given someone a you got the start time, you got the end time, you got all this stuff to figure it out. In the past, I don't think they've been in any position to handle that. That's been like way down the list of things to focus on. Too busy ripping out stations and putting in new ones. But the in future, it does sound, and maybe we'll get onto this as well, like the new CEO, Rob Barossa, is starting to put, I'm pretty sure he's fairly influential in bringing this back. They've been doing little snippets with him kind of answering questions, and this being one of the main ones that he's got obviously every few minutes on Twitter. But I think, I can see the writing of the ship in a way, at least on the kind of administrative side, that this is gonna, again, you may get those strikes if you're on these free plans and kind of taking advantage of them. I can see it being all right, here's a warning, but in future this is in jeopardy. And a lot of this I wanted to kind of be a PSA initially, just for anyone who's watching at the start, to really get these kind of points that you need to know for the new pricing, the new fees, idle fees, the potential ins and outs of when you might get charged, all this kind of stuff, and a general warning that they may be getting their ship in order finally.
Right. And I think you and I have talked about this, like on the side, is that it does seem like Electrify America is now they're trying to switch it to a for-profit model, right? So they're really trying to they're really trying to shift to where they're actually making money, kind of what EVgo did, right, when they came off of that NRG judgment. And one other thing I wanted to mention about those idle fees, because we were talking about gaming the system and everything else, the Electrify America was very clear that your membership, your 25% membership discount, or your free charging, and none of that is going to offset this idle fee. And I think it might have been Sky, someone asked whether if you have like a plan with Electrify America, whether they have your billing information on file. So that's going to be interesting for those people, VW ID4 owners or whomever, who have these free accounts. I don't know how those automakers do that billing on the back end, because if it's a free account, they shouldn't be asking for that person's payment. So does that mean VW is footing the bill if an ID4 owner with free charging goes an hour over on idle fees? So
for me, it has got that requirement to have a card on file, and I think that's probably flat across the system. It's different with the ID4, as you say, because that's, for some of those users, it's unlimited. So they may never have to pay. But for me, once we tick over into that 31st minute, we're paying, should be paying, right? We should have had that session completed, or be willing to pay the, if you're on a Pass Plus plan, which, is a bit weird if you're on a free plan as well. But you may be, if you're going over into 35, 40 minutes, which isn't impossible in the winter, or if you're just wanting to hang out for a meal, it then needs to charge you. So we do have that card on file. I would assume it's the same for ID4 owners. But if there's anyone in the comments here who can let us know for sure, if you have an ID4 or have seen one with an account, do let us know. So yeah, on the comments, let's see. We've talked about the card on file. Sky is in Columbus, Ohio. I think we are pretty well connected, both of us, all of us, three of us. 2018 Model 3, and has experience with the EV6, as we know. Yeah, and there you go. Runty the Star, they have an ID4. They pay starting at the 31st minute as well. Okay, so it's the same as us. I guess it must have been the 22 edition in that case that had the unlimited.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's good to know, because if they do have that billing information, and then I guess one other thing too with this idle fees, so far they've been 100% only. That's been their limit. In the past, and actually I think still currently, maybe some Tesla owners can chime in with this, but there are some supercharger stations where those idle fees started at 80% battery. Now, and you know, with Electrify America, they do have like your app warning, and they let you know, hey, your charge rate's going to slow down. You're hitting 80%. Are they going to maybe start idle fees for these busier stations, or even, you know, tiered pricing or things like that, where if it's a busier station that has a different pricing structure, you might need to look out for that and say, hey, you could get charged more if you stay for more than 30, 40, 50 minutes. So.
Yep. And Tesla does it by station. I mean, not everyone can do this because they won't necessarily know, but station utilization rate. So if it's at 50% utilization, they charge a certain amount, and then if it's at 100%, you get, I think it's $1 a minute or something pretty extensive. So it goes up fairly quickly then, and it's a clear penalty to get off and move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we will probably come back to, there you go. Idle start at 80% if you don't increase past 80%. Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, we'll probably be back to idle fees, but I want to make sure we get all of the kind of nuggets before we go back to the kind of general topics. So the change here is where previously you did have two, different pricing approaches, mainly because in some states, in general, they can't, as a charge point operator, charge people per kilowatt hour, because they're not allowed to dispense energy in that way and become, it's the old laws affecting utilities. So, and it varies. There's so many, seeming disparities between it that I've lost track of which is which. But, the long story short being, in Massachusetts, we still pay per minute, or have done until recently. And when we go into New York, we'll pay per kilowatt hour. So Electrify America's pricing previously was based in per minute states. You'd get that kind of somewhere between 15 and 19 cents, depending on the power level. And then above that, if you were going into a certain power level, I think it was above 90 kilowatts or 91 kilowatts, you were going to pay a higher rate per minute, because you're dumping more in more quickly into the car. And then the flat rate per kilowatt hour, which, again, I can put the numbers up here once I look through the notes. But essentially now we're moving to a place where every charging station potentially could have different pricing. And the big call out there, at least the PSA, before you take it away, Eric, is the looking at the station when you arrive, or looking at the charger screen, because Electrify America, for whatever reason, has said it's going to try and be up to date in the app, but I guess they either know the app is not as reliable or as stable as they would want it to be, or that the real-time pricing may be changing to such a granular level that they really want to make people aware, minimize surprises, right? To look at that screen when you get to the charge station and see what you're paying. It's something I've always advocated with ChargePoint, because the price is set by the site host. So you could get some very unpleasant surprises if you stay over a certain period. But it's something that people are going to have to start getting into the habit of doing at Electrify America, where previously they may have thought, I know the pricing inside out, it's all good.
Right. Yeah. So shout out to Darren. Hey, Darren. I think to me, and we've talked about this too, Steve, is I think, to me, you're getting to the station, and Electrify America said this very specifically in their communication, is you will be billed for what is displayed on the charger when you get there. And so I think that's, like, to your point about being transparent. Don't look at the app. Don't look at the website. Right, when you stand in front of that charger and you start that session, what it says the price is what you're going to be billed. And then if you're a member, you'll get that 25% discount. Right. And my problem with that is they're not really good at communicating their prices in a way that, think about how much, from a customer perspective, you're exiting the freeway, getting to the charging site, pulling in front of a charger, and now you have to look at the screen and say, what, this site is charging me 60 cents per kilowatt hour? I wouldn't even have got off the freeway if I had known that. So I do think that is an issue that I'm not super happy about. And and then this also plays into, is that time of use driven as well as demand for the site driven as well as other factors. And so unlike a gas station where you see the road sign before you pull off, or you see a big display at the charging site or the fueling site before you get there, what the pricing is now, you're going to have to pull all the way in and say, hey, look, we're charging you whatever we're charging you per minute or per kilowatt hour. And I think that's a little bit problematic, but I do get it and I do sort of support it, except it also doesn't really affect, in my opinion, the bigger issue which Electrify America has, which are the free charging sessions, right? Because if you're getting free charging, that really doesn't do anything to offset the demand that Electrify America appears to be trying to offset by these variable prices. So a good example for the California owners, right? If you're traveling I-5, there's that Kettleman City Electrify America, a nice bank of 10 of the paired 350 kilowatt chargers with the solar canopy in the middle of I-5, halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's a busy, high demand site. If you're still going to it might be $1 a kilowatt hour, but it could still be filled with ID4s and Hyundai Ioniqs and BMW EVs who are all charging for free. So for them, it doesn't really matter. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around how this variable pricing is really going to impact the demand for stations, the traffic at those stations, and really what EA is hoping to accomplish by doing it.
For sure. Yeah, and Jay here kind of echoes your point just before you made it, so we'll give him the credit for this one.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see this in Europe as well with it's crystal clear when you go to a gas station how much you're paying right per gallon. It's on those signs, as soon as you drive in.
Right.
So, and I started to see that per kilowatt hour. It's kind of as much as we don't want to emulate the gas model, in some cases it simply is one of those things, and it sounds like that California legislation or requirement is probably going to filter out through NEVI and everything else.
Well, I would say we're not the only ones discussing this, because I guess I'll throw a shout out to Technology Connections, has a great channel, much bigger than us.
Yeah, he doesn't. Sorry. We'll definitely shout him out, but I don't think he needs it.
Yeah, exactly. But I watched one of his recent videos talking about this, and he is also of that opinion that we are inevitably going to see charging stations, at least along highways, return to that gas station model, where we're going to see these charging stations look more and more like gas stations. Like you said, in Europe, we're already seeing it with like the Circle K and the sign where it has the gas price, and then right below it has how much per kilowatt hour you're going to pay to charge your EV there in Norway. So yeah, I think these are changes that are inevitable, in my opinion. So
yeah, Tom, who's up in New Hampshire, my neighbor, who we've spent some time, he's got a Genesis GV60, previously had an Ioniq 5, so we are well in on the eGMP platform over here. But yeah, he points out that you see those charging cost signs a lot in those 1,000-kilometer challenges. Which, Eric, are you doing any more of those soon?
Not really. Like I'm always sort of reluctant to do it because I don't want to steal someone else's thunder. And then for me, and we've talked about this, that's not the way I travel, and I'm almost not of the opinion that that's the way most people travel, right? So it's really, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to test a vehicle that hasn't been tested before. Like I would love to get my hands on a Chevy Spark EV and do the 1,000-kilometer challenge, right? Because who else is going to do it? Like, where has it been tested that way? Because it would be fun to see some of these cars that can't really be tested that way. But I don't have any plans. Unfortunately, GM is a little slow in getting me some review cars. Like I'd like to get my hands on a Lyric, but when they're available. So
yeah, and all the people we know with lyrics are on the East Coast, right? So
yeah,
shout out to Walter, who's on, I think it's the Network Architect channel. He's a proud lyric owner, a lot of good, really. I'm actually trying to see if he's interested in coming and talking to us, but he's got a Cadillac Lyric. He's checking out a lot of the Altium Pilot Flying J sites over in, remind me, Virginia, is it, or North Carolina?
Oh no, like I think Tennessee is a big one. I guess Flying J's headquarters is in Knoxville, and then also in Georgia they have some sites going in. So
good. Yeah, and so that, and that kind of, again, the gas station model, I've started seeing the New York Thruway sites coming online through Apple Green Electric, and they're, they haven't got those signs yet, but they're on the price, where it uptakes, where you expect to pay more for gas on the Thruway because you don't have to get off. That's one of the more expensive brands that I've seen. It's around 59 cents per kilowatt hour, and no memberships, nothing. It's just a rate that you pay if you plug in there. So it adds up quickly. I just went for a really quick 4 or 5 minute stop the other day and paid something like $6 or $7 because, the Ionic's just dumping in the energy, and it's, it's eating it up pretty quick. So you pay for that convenience. Again, I think Darren further up, where were we at? Yeah. He had said disincentivized travel. It's getting expensive for larger vehicles to travel. I mean, this is going to be, I'm trying to think, like, if somebody stopped at one of these Thruway sites that I'm talking about at basically 60 cents per kilowatt hour, and they're just having if you're not really thinking about it, you're going to come back to some sticker shock if your Lightning fills up, 90, 100 kilowatt hours at that rate. You're, but I suppose if you buy a big and efficient truck, you're kind of asking to get gouged.
Yeah, and I almost feel that way because this is something that's been a big pet peeve of mine in the EV industry as a whole, is we don't see a lot of comparisons of like vehicle types, right? So we're seeing people do comparisons of like the Tesla Model 3 and the GMC Hummer EV and saying, well, this one is so inefficient. And it's like, well, we have to realize that once we expand these formats out beyond what's the very narrow current EV models that are available, then you'll see that there are plenty of gas trucks that are only getting 8, 9, 10 miles to the gallon. For anyone, again, California folks who've driven through Fresno, you're going to get passed by a lifted pickup truck riding on 40-inch tires doing 100 miles an hour down the freeway. I don't want to see their gas bill, but they're gonna, and so this is going to apply to EVs as well, where if you get a Chevrolet Silverado EV, if you're driving a Ford F-150 EV and Lightning, you're going to pay significantly more than someone in a Hyundai Ioniq 5 or a Kia EV6 or any of these other smaller cars like a Bolt EV especially, or you're going to be paying significantly more to be driving a less efficient EV, and that's not really that different than gas-powered vehicles right now.
We'll be used to it, and the I mean, it just depends where the prices land, I guess, which is kind of the point, really. This, do you have any kind of thoughts, speculation on, if there's what kind of bracket we're going to be getting into here? I'm kind of taking that, at least in my area, 59 cents a kilowatt hour is that topping out. It's pretty hard to get above that, although we'll play a fun game of whether anyone can beat that in a minute. But between, it's really not, if I'm seeing 35 cents a kilowatt hour now, it's that's on the cheap side. It's not too bad.
Yeah, and I think we had mentioned that too. Like, I don't know if that's a separate topic that we want to talk about beyond just the variable pricing, but just what is a fair price, right, for public DC fast charging. And I personally think 35 cents a kilowatt hour is a fair price. And if you look at that, now that's not universal though, because that's just a national average. So like gas might be what, $3.50 an average a gallon across the United States, but it's $5 a gallon at my local gas station. So I'm just looking at national averages. National average for electricity at home is 17 cents per kilowatt hour. So just doubling that, right? And that's what I'm thinking is more or less a fair rate would be about double what you pay at home. And so we'll see how close Electrify America comes to that. And I think they certainly need to come to that close if they're charging $7 a month for a membership fee.
And that was one of the questions there. We want
Mm-hmm.
to, I think you had mentioned on the last stream, this is going to change how you charge with Electrify
Mm-hmm.
America.
Mm-hmm.
So are you still with that? You're giving up that membership
Yeah,
as of tomorrow?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, tomorrow. Well, I think it goes through the month that I pay
Okay,
the
yeah, you'll
$4.
finish
But
canceling that.
yeah, I am going to cancel my Pass Plus membership as a result. Part of it, I can get away with it. I have so many other options, and part of what I do is to try those other options. So I'm not like, in this group think of only Electrify America is available as a public charging option, but they're still the most convenient for travel, even for me. But it's just not worth it. The number of times I use their chargers, the increase in price, that's almost, I mean, it's what I think it's technically 40%, but I feel like it's almost doubling the cost per month to charge at Electrify
Yeah,
America if you're a member. So to me, it's just not worth it. I'm gonna drop my Pass Plus membership, and I'll just pay as I go.
for sure. I think the previously the break even was at around 33 kilowatt hours. If you added that much in a month, you were breaking even, and anything after that was savings. So if it holds that, there's still that 25% savings from pass, if that gap is still going to be what the discount is, then looking at $7, you were closer to 59 kilowatt hours for the break even, which again isn't, I think, if you charged the way we charge, maybe it's 2 sessions, but I can blow, if I leave it on, I can blow through 60 kilowatt hours in a fairly reasonable session. So you still are only on that 1 or 2 charges per month, but as you say, if there are options,
Right.
I'm starting to see that a lot more now, at least on that, again, that throughway route that we do a lot from Massachusetts over to Ohio, mostly in New York. There's a lot of different options along the way. Now, EVgo started to build out in Syracuse, a lot more in Albany, where they're arguably better than Electrify America in terms of coverage. You've got the Magic Dock for whatever that's worth. For people with an Ioniq 5 won't be using that, but those locations can be quite good, and
and also quite expensive.
For sure, yeah. It's for the redundancy if you need it, but again, that's those are on that 52 cents per kilowatt hour kind of level, and with Tesla it's more like that plan is $12.99 a month,
right?
So that's a membership fee again. I think we'll probably get into memberships here in a sec, because that requires something like 110 kilowatt hours. And again, this is such a pilot that there's only a very niche amount of people are actually going to be able to use that. I could do a Tesla only road trip if it wasn't going to take me 16, 17 hours to get across the state. But not many people, I would think, are going to be on that membership plan at this point. When it changes next year, who knows? But at the moment, that's not compelling at all.
Right. Well, and I mean, but I do think that's a good point of comparison, though, because Electrify America's cost to recoup membership, right? It basically doubled with this change. You went from around 30 kilowatt hours that you needed to charge before you broke even with your membership plan to now about double that, about 60. But by comparison, Tesla's Magic Dock is double what Electrify America is going to. And then EVgo has their own sort of membership tiers, which in my opinion are way more. We could get into EVgo in a separate topic because they're even more convoluted, way more than they need to be. But at least with them, their basic membership plan is actually a charging credit. So you get back literally what you put in.
Yep.
So that's a slightly different model. But one thing I wanted to give my hot take on this, because we're talking about the DC pricing spectrum, and this is what I had mentioned to you, is I think personally, if a charging provider cannot sell power profitably at around 35 cents per kilowatt hour, they've done something wrong with their site design, their site layout, how they've chosen to put that site together. And the reason I say that is we know there are demand fees, right? We know that, you know, you're going to have spikes in demand, huge power draws for short periods of time, and then nobody's going to be at your charger, that sort of thing. And so if a charging provider isn't building in battery, grid tie battery connections, if they're not building in solar panels, if they're not doing things to already offset time of use charges and demand fees, and fluctuating demand for the site, those are problems they needed to address in the design and development of their site phase. And so I feel like just increasing pricing at a site level is a band-aid to cover up for the fact that they didn't design their site properly in the first place. And so I know that's a bit of a hot take, but I feel pretty strongly about that. Is right now they're passing on the cost of poor site design onto early adopter EV owners who they know are going to have to pay that price anyway. So that's a little bit frustrating to me, as I would rather see them keep their prices competitive, and not, you know, just transfer that cost of a poor site design onto the EV owners.
For sure. Sky brings up a West Virginia is definitely the outlier. Everything's different in wild, wonderful West Virginia. Woefully short of fast charging. Yeah, they did that. I wanted to play a little game. What your lowest, and this isn't including free sites. Free sites are off the table for this. But what is the lowest price per kilowatt hour you've seen for DC fast charging? Let's say above 50 kilowatts, because below that it's you know, probably given away for free, or is just in West Virginia, as we say. And what is the highest? Again, for me, the lowest until recently was up in New Hampshire, actually, at Clem's Express, which I think Tom's probably been to, at PCs and EVs. That was at 20 cents per kilowatt hour, but Sign of the Times, they just doubled it, and it's now 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Right across the board, that's pretty, you know, consistent in this area. And then my most egregious example would, and again, I kind of hesitate to put this one on because most of them tend to be at Hyundai dealerships. But what was the one that I had? I actually found out this site had a, I'm pretty sure they're just doing it as a disincentive to use it, but it was $1.50 per kilowatt hour. And then at the same time, after half an hour, 75 cents a minute. So, and I think this was at a Hyundai dealership in not far from me, actually, in Boston, just outside of Boston. So if you are going to a Hyundai dealership to charge, please check that charge point screen or the app before you plug in, because by God, it'll get expensive quickly. Eric, you're in the land of fairly expensive electricity as well. Any kind of highs and lows? Well, and if you have them, pop them down in the comments, please, because we'd love to see the kind of, you know, variation people are and what you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, so I recency bias aside, because I can remember a point in time where EVgo's full membership was 10 cents per kilowatt hour or 10 cents a minute or whatever. So it worked out to, like 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So those were great times back then. But that's one area where I think FreeWire. So usually through EV Connect, and we've seen a lot more of their FreeWire chargers going in at gas stations, at travel plazas. And the FreeWire Boost, for those who aren't familiar, that's the charger with that built-in integrated 160 kilowatt hour battery pack. And so they're already immune from demand charges, and they only need about 25 kilowatt input power to output 150 kilowatts. So and because of that, their standard fee, at least around here, is 35 cents flat per kilowatt hour. No membership, no nothing else. You just swipe your credit card and start charging at 35 cents a kilowatt hour. For me, that's good. That's great. That's good enough. We don't have too many egregious ones, though. I think I know the one that takes the cake, and I think it's out in Ohio, where a municipality just didn't know what they were doing, and they set a charge point express to, I think, $5 a minute, I think is what it was.
Right.
So
that's
it was
just to that was actually charge you.
That's newsworthy nationwide. Yeah, $5 a minute. What are you doing?
That's the kind of thing where they'll take it and say, "See, look how expensive it is to charge an EV." Like, you know,
right?
Take out a Hummer EV and goes, "Everyone drives a Hummer EV, right? So this is how much you pay to charge up your EV next week."
I paid $1,500 in Ohio.
I can't believe it. Cool. So yeah, folks, drop those down in the comments. We'll review them as we get towards the end. So we're kind of in the middle bit. I want to make sure I give a shout out. There's a few people who asked me to pass on their comments. Tyler at the Average EV can't make it tonight, but he's pretty happy with the new pricing scheme. Certainly, idle fees he was glad about. Says it makes sense given the varying US energy costs. He would pay more for reliability. I think that, you know, a few people have kind of gone both ways on this, like, and Tyler's channel, the Average EV, it's not linked there, but you can certainly find that pretty easily in your YouTube search after this, hopefully. And then there's some good videos on his channel in a Volkswagen ID4 primarily. He does trips around that kind of North Carolina area, Maryland, that kind of thing. So he's got you know, areas that we wouldn't necessarily be able to cover. And yeah, he was saying he wishes that Electrify America included the tax in the price as Tesla does. So that it's clearer for people. And again, I don't know if that's not necessarily in gas terms. You probably won't see that either, right? There, it's been so long since I've bought it. I don't know if what you're seeing on the screen there on the pricing list is pre-tax. I would think, right?
Yeah, I think it is, because I'm visualizing the EA display after you get done with the session.
And it adds it right at the end, right?
Yeah, so I mean, and that to me is forgivable if you're calculating the total tax at the end, but you should know what the tax. Gas pumps do the same thing, is they tell you, oh, you have X amount of state tax and X amount of federal tax per gallon.
Yep.
So you know up front that, so they should be doing something very similar, I would hope.
For sure. Cool. Yeah, so I'm glad we were able to get that in. And your channel, Eric, News Coulomb. I'm sure everybody knows you. But the extra there is 3705. I don't know if you are the 3705th of the noble Coulomb clan, but there you are.
Hey, I take what YouTube gives me these days.
Yeah, it's just table scripts.
Not much.
So go over and subscribe, please, because this is on my channel just for convenience at the moment. So you know, obviously, I appreciate your participation, and this wouldn't be happening without you. So thank you very much. Make sure you get subscribed and watch as many of Eric's videos as you can.
As many as you can stomach.
And then we have Tom, who I mentioned before, up in New Hampshire. He has a channel called PCs and EVs. He will build your PC and talk about EVs at the same time. Genesis GV60 right now is tested an Ioniq 6 recently, I believe. Has been covering all the kind of charging port issues, that kind of thing. So he's got some good stuff on there as well. So there's my promotional plugs out of the way. Anyone you want to shout out? I know Darren has a channel as well. I don't actually put it on, so but he's in the comments, so he can leave it right there.
Yeah, and then he's also, yes, thank you, Darren. He's chiming in with the tax is not always included with Tesla, so yeah.
Good. And then there's your extra plug, your site reviews.
Woo. Awesome. Yes, thank you. I gotta get more of those done. I have an exciting one that I want to look at. So
awesome. Yeah, what I like about those is that, you know, not going too far off topic, it's kind of a vision into the future. At least for me, I don't know what everyone else is saying, but you know, I would imagine pretty similar, because we're not way behind the curve in Boston and on the East Coast. What happens around California usually works its way over here not too long after. So it's kind of a little crystal ball you have for us.
And if you want a profitable EV site, typically you're going to want to start someplace like California, so and then expand from there, because that's where you're going to see most of your EV traffic still.
Yeah. Alrighty, so we're clocking through time. After this, I mean, we've got a list the length of my arm, so I don't know if you just want to jump into it. If you're running out of juice, I've got plenty to throw at you. But
I've got plenty of juice, so
you're at about 70%, so plenty of time. All right, go ahead. So I've got a bunch here, but over to you for a second.
Okay, so I don't want to jump too much onto your to your list, but I know we also talked about charger reservations. I don't know if you wanted to jump into that.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of piggybacks into EVgo, I think, a little bit with the how complex pricing could get. Because when I
Right.
look at EVgo, I've used them plenty, and I'm a big advocate for their latest sites. They've got a lot of really good stuff, but man, is it complicated. Look at those screens, and there's just all kinds going on. But reservations are one that they're not alone in. They certainly have added it as part of some of their plans as a selling point. So you can see they're trying to say
Right.
this is a differentiation, but ChargePoint has that facility as well, right? Don't think you're
I
a
think
fan.
Rivian is talking about it. Was Tesla also talking about it for the superchargers? I don't know that they were.
I haven't
Maybe
covered
not.
anything, no, come across it, but they may have to if they start getting super busy. This could be
Yeah, but I think we've talked about that. I am not a fan of reservations, and I feel like it's one in hand is worth two in the bush sort of thing, right? If you're a charging provider, you want your equipment sitting idle for as little time as possible. And so giving people the option to essentially block a charger that they're not using that could be in use for someone else just kind of rubs me the wrong way, right? Like I think, and this maybe gets back to that gas station model. When was the last time you were able to reserve a gas pump? And I think as EVs get faster charging, as chargers get faster charging, this is going to become less and less and less of an issue. And having a charger sit idle for 20 minutes, two Ionic 5s or EV6s could pull in and charge from 0 to 50% and leave in that period of time. Right? Like, so if you're talking about someone reserving a charger that they're not going to use for another 20 to 30 minutes, you could literally be queuing up two additional cars that didn't need to wait, that could have charged up and left. And so, like, this idea of doing these reserved charging sessions, it's just, and the logistics of it just bother me. And then, of course, you have spiteful EV owners who, I pull into a charger and I'm about to use it, and it says this is reserved in 15 minutes. So and so is going to show up and try to use it. I might just park and leave, like walk my dog somewhere and say, well, good luck. That charger is going to be blocked when you get there. Or I'll take the cord from the other side of the stall and plug into a different charger. And so the charger you reserved isn't even accessible. And I could see that happening as well. It's almost like unnecessarily adding a potential for drama at the stations. We've already had people asking about queues. How do you queue up at a charger when it's nose in parking? It doesn't necessarily make sense, as opposed to pull through parking. So yeah, I think there's a lot of these questions that aren't really answered by charger reservations, and if anything, there are a lot of issues that are exacerbated by adding that feature and functionality.
Yeah, it seems like a solution in search of a problem, right? It's not
Right.
really, I don't think it's going to solve a bunch of things. And really the solution to, lines and people being backed up at chargers is more chargers. We need those
Right.
sites, we need those stations, however you deal with it. We've, been back and forth on conversation about mega sites versus, just lots of 4, 6, 8 stall ones. But whatever the case is, we need those places to go. I'd rather be able to roll through a place, see it's full or know it's full from the app, and then move on to the next one, which is
Right.
a few miles down the road, then reserve it and deal with the drama when I get there. So certainly, yeah, I think that's pretty much a non-starter for a lot of people.
And maybe this is the theme of this whole stream, is stop using changes to your pricing model and access model to compensate for inadequate site design, right? So it's a band-aid. It helps the charging provider, but it's not helping the customer. And I think the only fair way to do a charger reservation is if you are actively charging a fee to whoever reserved that charger for the entire time that they reserved it. So if you're driving along the freeway and you reserve a charger and you're an hour out, you are paying the going rate to use that charger for the entire hour that you're driving, then you're going to pay to use it. That's the only way that makes sense to me to do it fairly.
This guy says, Teslas, do they need to queue just to organize the chaos at those busier sites? Las Vegas is a good call out. I saw a post on one of the channels about every driving into Vegas, they showed their position and everything was clocked. It was all people waiting. Obviously busy holiday kind of times. It's rough. I think that I don't know if reservations there would be the answer, and if Rivian's looking at it, there's certainly that kind of. I mean, Rivian going to universal access at some point next year, hopefully. But still having that, they haven't had very long exclusivity. There's more Rivians on the road now, but maybe that would be something they would do to say, look, our sites, they were intended to be exclusive. We've benevolently opened up, but Rivian owners still get first dibs, that kind of thing. Right. So maybe it could be brand and charger aligned for that reason, but I think it really does feel like specific use cases, and just I really wouldn't want to see it proliferate across the board.
Yeah, we've already started to see fights break out at crowded charging stations over access. There's really, I don't know, this is just throwing gasoline on the fire, on an EV fire.
Don't talk about EV fires. We've got to have the requisite thing: EVs burn at a rate less than blah blah blah, disclaimer, etc. Brad says this may be a good point. I've definitely run into this. Level 2, maybe DC fast charging is at hotels, but that's a little bit of a weird kind of use case. But level 2s, I've definitely had places where I would have paid, I think, to secure that. My father-in-law did a road trip where I had to kind of help him find a plan B through Connecticut because we had booked a hotel with a charger. And it's a dumb Clipper Crete unit. They're rock solid. They work really well. But if someone's on it, you're not. So
I think to Brad's point, I think that might be the one area where I completely agree with reservations. But you have someone on staff there to do that. And I've called ahead to like Best Westerns in Utah or whatever, and they'll put a cone out or whatever, and they'll block a charging space because you're renting a room from them.
Yeah, so reserve the room, you can reserve a space. And again, if we get even there, the answer is potentially more charging stations, right? Especially with the decreased cost of level 2 and that becoming a differentiator for hotels, at least for a few years here. I'm gonna go if you have a bank of L2s and that's available, I'd take that any day of the week, and I'd pay for reserving it if I needed to.
Just the convenience. Yeah,
for sure. Okay. Well, still on fees, let's briefly cover session fees. Again, I think we're both 2 thumbs down, but wax eloquent on that for a minute or so.
Yeah, I mean the session fees, I think that's really something EVgo is known for, and I absolutely hate them. Right, like especially if you're talking about a charger where it's not necessarily the most reliable. Like maybe it still works, but you have to unplug and replug in again. Or if you have a timed session, which is just as bad. Now you're saying, pay $5 up front to charge for 30 minutes. And then what happens at the end of 30 minutes, especially if you're on a slower charger, then you have to do another session again. And it just feels like a money grab that's absolutely not necessary. The one thing that I will say to maybe justify it is one of the reasons that I've heard that we've seen issues with credit card readers and payment readers on chargers is that they do have a timeout session. So unlike a gas station where you put your credit card in, you're never pumping gas for more than 10 to 15 minutes, even with a huge gas tank. A charger, you could easily be there for 30 to 40 to 45 minutes. So if that charge session on your card expires, then it could cause some billing issues. So I could see it from that perspective, but they're already doing memberships that have your billing usually at this point anyway. So if you're doing all of that other stuff, there's zero reason to charge an upfront session fee, in my opinion.
With EVgo, it feels like, because I had to go and look at their plans again the other day because it was just, I still don't have a handle on it. If you asked me to explain it now, I was not paying attention enough to be able to take it all in. But, it feels like, they have the software as a service kind of trick is to, put all the things. Here's, what this doesn't have on the free plan, but look, upgrade premium and, gold and platinum.
Right.
It feels like they're adding things to check off, right? There's only so many
Right.
things that you can add for charging, and there are some there that I think, we could get into with time of use. There's a sustainability aspect to that. It's part of EVs that I like, managing the demand at peak and trough and those kind of things. So I get into that and I have a feel for that. But session fees, reservation fees, parking fees to an extent, unless you're looking at a certain point where, you want to try and increase throughput and say after 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever, you're overstaying your welcome. But all of that stuff feels like a laundry list of things to put on this checklist of like, here's what you get when you cut out session fees and cut out, add reservations and all this kind of stuff is just a laundry list of, hey, you pay us monthly and we'll give you these special privileges.
Well, and that is a point where maybe you and I do disagree, right? Because I actually am a fan of Pitt the Elder. No, so yeah, I am a fan of parking fees after a set period of time, but it needs to make sense both to the end user, both to the customer and to the business host, right? So if you're running a convenience store and you have 350 kilowatt chargers, do you really want someone sitting there for more than 15 to 20 minutes? And if not, what is a gentle way to discourage people from staying longer? Well, maybe tack on a 10 cent per minute or a 15 cent per minute idle fee or a parking fee. So say, hey, look, we know you might need this charge, but you're going to have to pay a little bit extra for it if you're blocking the next person behind you who's going to be charging 3 or 4 times faster than you and is more likely to come into our convenience store and use our business. And so it's going to be really dependent on the location, the type of charger, and the type of business. But it also needs to make sense to the customer of, this site is for a fast food restaurant. You shouldn't be here for 2 hours. This site is a convenience store. You shouldn't be here for 30 minutes, right? And so it's just a way to push or nudge in the right direction the behavior you want to see from your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in the sense of if it's well done and managed by someone who knows what they're doing, you could really, use them and tweak it as a good lever to adjust behavior. I just don't have any faith in most of the people setting these prices to do that. It's going to be something that is most cases, at least at the moment, maybe when we get into a more mature kind of, CPO environment, there'll be some experts to guide this if you're looking for a job, Eric. But
a job for experts.
But at the moment I can just see it being applied as a blunt force kind of tool and someone gets back to a $20-$30 charge for something that they didn't realize was really going to happen.
Right.
Well, I get where you're coming from.
But also you're right in the sense that out of the gate, like EVgo, if I had one of my top 3 criticisms of them as a company, it's their convoluted billing, right? It's the worst customer experience I think of any charging provider right now is how complicated their billing is.
I didn't get the visual, it's off, but I basically had a session, got on the trip we did with 6,000 odd miles across a lot of states there, EVgo per minute for about 55-60 kilowatt hours, which is what you'll get from 10 to 80% in the Ioniq 5 when it's in that kind of 18 to 20 minute bracket. Cost $6, I think, tops in Illinois and those per minute states, 25 or 27 maybe in Pennsylvania. I just didn't even think about it. Again, I was looking at the pricing. It was just kind of it. They're good equipment. I appreciate, where they're placed around Pittsburgh and some of those locations, but that was a kind of, this is where it needs to go one way or the other. We need to have an easier, more streamlined system to understand. And EVgo is probably aside from ChargePoint and the site host kind of, disparity, which you have to check anyway. EVgo is just so hard to understand as a uniform provider who you would hope would have it together.
Right. And we're not speaking the same language. So when I talk to you about my EVgo experiences in California, they're nothing like your EVgo experiences, right? So it's like we're not even speaking that same sort of common language.
Yep.
And that per minute fee is one area where I think Electrify America did do a better job than EVgo because of the tiered rates. Because if you get on an EVgo charger that's a 350 kilowatt charger that's charging you per minute, you might only be paying like 4 cents a kilowatt hour in your Hyundai Ioniq 5, which is ridiculously cheap. And it shouldn't be that cheap.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
It's because they just have a blanket. You're paying 30 cents a minute. Okay.
Yep.
So what does that mean?
It's going to happen. I have that questions banner ticking down, so it would be remiss not to address the questions. So Sky has one for you. Interesting SoCal EV sites to visit. Is going to visit, and you've been there. So what do you think?
Oh, there's a lot. It depends where you're coming from. And Southern California is huge. So, the one that I'm most looking forward to that I haven't been to is there's an EVgo 350 kilowatt charger at an In-N-Out Burger right off the I-5 in Valencia, I think it is, or Santa Clarita. So right as you're heading down into Los Angeles. Obviously, the big one you want to check out is Baker Electrify America, with their solar canopies, their full pull-through parking. Just a great site design, in my opinion.
And a massive thermometer.
Huh?
And
well, the thermometer is over by the EVgo site.
EVgo,
but you get to see a massive Tesla supercharger there too that I think is 100 stalls now. So that's it over by the Dairy Queen in Baker, California. That's another one to check out. And then of course, if you're in Pasadena, just to see a massive Power Up Pasadena 50, like I think between Tesla and the Power Up Pasadena V-fills, it's like 40 or 50 charging stalls at the top of a parking building in the middle of Old Town Pasadena. It's just a great location too. So yeah.
He's got it. All right, those have gone down on the list. Very good.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, this is the last topic we hit. Possible that per minute was right all along? Probably not, but it's, we keep coming back to it. I mean, I think this is down to the fact that it's so cheap, in a lot of these places where, at least, if you're in a car that's going to, even actually, I did the experiment in the Bolt as well, pre-March EA prices rising, but same difference, with per minute versus per kilowatt hour, it still worked out about just less than double the price in a per kilowatt hour state, because those per minute rates are so cheap, and it just expands out to even more savings as you hit those faster charging cars. I think that's more a case of, at least from what I've seen, price calibration, right? They haven't got a handle on how to get the right amount to tune it so they set it cheaper, and you get a great deal from it, but that's not going to be lasting going forward. You've still got to come back to how much do they pay per kilowatt hour, and what are you paying per kilowatt hour?
Oh, interesting. Well, just to quell the confusion, I posted as a plug and play EV, I guess. To answer Jay,
one of those.
To answer Jay Donaldson, I do plan to get the adapter for the Tesla superchargers for my Bolt EV and my Ranger EV. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point. A CCS adapter for superchargers when they become available, but I don't know if I'll be able to access it, right? There's still that whitelist that you have to get on. So.
Yeah, and Leonard's follow-up was also for the per minute encourages only charging at high power. I don't know how long we're going to go here, because again, we've got all kinds of stuff and going into variable modular power, and there's some really interesting things in sites in Europe and around the place where you can select, dialing in how much power you actually want, and having that choice, which, for me, I just went back to Herkimer. It's my favorite place to be, apparently, but we sit down for a meal and the meal isn't even close to ordered yet, let alone arrived. I've got a coffee before the car's done and I need to go and move it. So those places where service is slow, I'd like to be able to say, right, I know they're not going to serve me quickly here, dial it down to 50, save a little bit of stress on the pack, and I'll pay a bit less, maybe, I don't know, but
because we could easily, you're right, Steve,
that's just probably a whole next thing, right? We've got the topics lined up for weeks here.
Pretty much. So
I mean, I don't know, any parting kind of thoughts, anything you want to shout out or call before we
other than I think I wore the appropriate shirt for this, Oh, not that you're going to see it, but it's as easy as 127. So
that's about it.
Yeah, that's what I feel like the math is.
Yeah, there's that meme that goes by as the math kind of passes you by. That's me when I'm looking at an EVgo pricing screen. Like, time of use, it's before the rush hour, so that's good. But I'm not on this plan, but I could upgrade to this plan. And I come out and I'm a calculus genius.
It is an inside joke, right? If you haven't been using EVgo for 10 years, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's kind of a true expert when you know nothing about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Let's see, what else I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. I think we're good, and I've certainly gone 5 minutes over the hour here. Thank you everybody for joining us. It's always good. These, one of the main reasons that I enjoy these is because we get, aside from having Eric's wisdom on the channel, we get the participation of everybody else, and there's a lot of people across the country. We have it pretty well covered here, and we're starting to talk to other people about whether they could join us as third, fourth guests. So we have between us a pretty good network of folks who I think would be enlightening to get on for certain topics. So yeah, as I say, you can drop it down in the comments after this goes live. There's still a comment section. You can email me at plugandplayev@gmail.com, or catch me on any of the social places that I hang out. And yeah, I'll take suggestions certainly, but we're not, this is not the Eric and Steve show. Has been so far, but we'd be more than happy to start getting more voices in here and have the chat live as well, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the big takeaway here too, is we're wanting this to be as inclusive as possible.
For sure.
So
yeah, the less I waffle on, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So for sure. All right, so that's just the PSA, and if anyone tunes in right at the end, from 17th of August, those prices are going to go up on Electrify America. You're going to need to check the station-specific screen. That may well change, and they may get their act together with the app, but be aware that's happening. Prices are going to be a little bit different. Idle fees will be in place, so let's see if we can get a movement here to just be aware of what your car is doing, how long it's going to take to charge, and move on when you finish that session. So that's a pretty good way to end it, I think. We should unplug now.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Have a wonderful evening, and I'm sure we'll see you for a fourth at some point soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye. Thank you.